What's happening, friends? Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick, and on this channel I talk about cryptocurrency, decentralized finance, and economics. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about Soulbound Tokens. Soulbound Tokens are one of the newest, most exciting things to come out of crypto recently. And in fact, the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, recently co-authored a paper about Soulbound Tokens. And what these basically are is they're like non-transferrable NFTs that allow you to have a decentralized digital identity tied to your wallet. In today's video, I'll go through a bit more about how these would work and some of the cool use cases that we could see from them in the future. Let's get into it. So as you can see here, like I mentioned before, Vitalik himself co-authored a paper about these, and the paper talks about a decentralized society, and basically the crux of it is that Soulbound Tokens would enable this decentralized society. And in fact, he's written a blog post about them before a few months ago earlier this year. So what exactly would be the use of these, right? Because I can see a lot of people are probably thinking, well, if you can't sell them, then there's no way for you to make money off of it, right? And first, I'd say take a step back, because there's use cases for crypto and for NFTs, and in this case for Soulbound Tokens, that don't necessarily have to do with making money, right? Ideally, we want to have use cases that make people's lives better, and this could be one of them. But basically, the use of them is that there's a lot of situations where you don't want something to be transferable. And let's talk about a few of those situations here. So imagine that you had a DAO, right? Imagine you had a DeFi project that was operated as a DAO with governance tokens, and you wanted to distribute those governance tokens to your users, right? Like a lot of them do. They'll give them to people who provide liquidity, people who use the DEX in other ways, and so on and so forth. It might also be important to you that the power to control that DAO did not get concentrated in the hands of a few whales, right? And if you were distributing the tokens, you could ensure that happened in some ways by capping the amount that you gave to certain size wallets and things like that. But if it's a transferable token, like most tokens are, then the whales could slowly accumulate over time and potentially even do something like a governance attack, or they might just not have the best interests of the protocol in mind. Well, with a Soulbound token, you could instead issue those tokens to the users, and the governance rights would be forever fixed to those same users. In fact, you could even give protocol fees to people who had those SBTs, right? So it doesn't mean that they wouldn't receive value from the governance holding, but you would guarantee that the governance holding stayed in the hands of people who you wanted it to. And you could even have things that were modifiable later on, right? So you could say that the governance rights only stay in the hands of people so long as they continue to use the protocol. That would be an interesting use. But basically, it would give the DAO itself better control over whose hands they put the governance rights into. Some other interesting use cases, and I think this is really where it starts to get interesting, is Soulbound Tokens would allow you to have communities that required you to achieve some task to join rather than just pay to enter, right? Right now, NFTs, different communities have different vibes, different interests sometimes, but at the end of the day, your entry is determined by your ability to purchase that NFT. One example I thought of is you could have a fitness DAO. You could have a DAO that was related to physical fitness, and perhaps you had to achieve certain milestones to advance to different positions within the DAO, and maybe you got a better, more advanced SBT as you lifted more weight or ran faster or did something else entirely, right? And you can imagine that there'd be a lot of different situations where you might have a organization like this, a DAO, that determined membership by things that had to be earned, and you didn't want people to be able to buy it, right? Because if you could issue an NFT for, say, squatting a certain amount of weight, but if someone could also buy that NFT, that kind of defeats the point. Another common use case, and this was actually called out in the paper, was degrees, right? So people talk about sometimes NFTs as being used for certifications or degrees, but any degree that can be bought loses all of its meaning as a signifier that someone's competent, right? And I mean, yes, there are problems with people paying their ways into certain universities, but But if you can just outright pay, that would be an entirely different thing. They would have no value at all. So something like that would have to be fixed to a certain wallet. And that's what these sorts of tokens would do, right? And you can probably already start to think about different types of use cases. And one thing that the paper that Vitalik co-authored called out is that eventually this would allow you to create a decentralized identity of sorts. And one benefit of that is that you could potentially bring things like uncollateralized loans or under-collateralized loans on chain, because you could have information like someone's employment history of paying back loans, financial history, other things like that tied to their wallet in these sorts of soulbound tokens. And so that would allow you to do that, and then that would really enable Web3 to start to replace some of the financial applications that exist in traditional finance. Really, really interesting, exciting stuff. And I know some people have some concerns about it, and I share some of them. So I'll try to talk a bit about some of those now as well. One concern that I've heard some people bring up with these is what happens if you lose your wallet, right? Because, or your wallet gets compromised somehow. Because if the tokens are tied to your identity, and maybe some of the tokens, it's a degree, right? You would not be able to easily re-earn that unless, I guess, you could go back to the university and they would reissue it in theory, but it could be a major hassle. One thing that this paper called out as a solution to that is something called community recovery. And basically what that would be is you would designate several guardians for your wallet, which would be people that you know and trust. And if the wallet was compromised or you lost access, those guardians could all agree that you were the person, and it would basically allow you to recover the contents of the wallet. And this is actually something that Vitalik has called out in the past as something that would enable crypto to go mainstream, because the current situation where if you lose your keys or lose your passphrase, you lose your funds would be a major, major obstacle to widespread adoption with hundreds of millions or billions of people self-custodying their own assets. Another concern that some people have is privacy, right? If you're bringing all this information on chain, how would it be private? And I think that's probably as far as I can tell, the biggest concern I would have right now, and maybe the biggest challenge, because there are networks like Secret Network or Oasis that have permission privacy, but I'm assuming right now the intention is for these to be built on Ethereum, and Ethereum does not have permission privacy. So maybe they'll have to find some way to do that through some sort of layer 2 rollup with ZK proofs. I don't know exactly, but I'll be interested to see how they solve that problem. And I think that getting over that will be a major hurdle. I know that Mina protocol is doing some interesting things as far as encrypting real world data on the chain. So maybe they would play into it somehow. Overall, though, I think this is going to be potentially a major narrative in the future, something I'll definitely be watching for the next bull run, and really just a cool use case of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. As of now, I don't know any ways that you can invest based on the sort of potential upcoming narrative of Soulbound tokens, but I'm guessing at some point there will be projects that will start to launch that plan to leverage these. Of course, the tokens themselves, since they're not transferable, you couldn't flip and sell them, but there may be projects that accrue value by issuing Soulbound tokens, or that otherwise play into the narrative by leveraging the decentralized data and identity that will be encoded in these tokens. That's all I got for today. Let me know what you think about Soulbound tokens down in the comments. And until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.